Improper alliances. We should avoid entering into partnerships with individuals who do not share our biblical values. Here now is Gene Getz.
Again, we have a principle from the life of King Jehoshaphat. And overall, he led people in the right direction. He was a good king. In fact, in 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verse 32, we read, "He walked in the way of Asa his father. He did not turn away from it, but did what was right in the Lord's sight." Now that's an overall statement, a general statement that Asa did walk in the ways of the Lord until towards the end of the life, towards the end of his life, he cut a deal with the king of Syria. And that was a bad situation, and God was really unhappy with him, and he hardened his heart. He just simply hardened his heart against the Lord. And it's a tragedy when you see that happening to a king who has been a good king in leading the children of Israel, or particularly in this case, Judah. Well, the fact of the matter is that when we talk about Jehoshaphat, who was the son of Asa, you have a very similar situation as a father-son, because it was towards the end of his life that he made a serious mistake, just like his dad. And that's fascinating, that he was like his dad in terms of most of his life, then made a mistake, hardened his heart, and that happened, of course, to Jehoshaphat. We read in 2 Chronicles 20:35, "After this, Judah's king Jehoshaphat made an alliance with Israel's king Ahaziah, who was guilty of wrongdoing." Now, in this particular verse, it says, "after this." The "after this" refers to that time of peace that God gave Jehoshaphat because he served the Lord and God gave him victory over his enemies. But notice it makes reference to Israel's king Ahaziah. Now, his father Asa cut a deal with the king of Syria, who was a pagan, absolute pagan. But here we have reference to the fact that King Jehoshaphat, in a sense, cut a deal with Israel, a king in Israel, which was Ahaziah. And Ahaziah in Israel was a very wicked king. And by the way, there was no exceptions in Israel. The northern kingdom, there was no exceptions. Every one of their kings was wicked. Now, there were exceptions, as we see in Judah. Jehoshaphat was one of those exceptions in serving the Lord. But he made an alliance with this wicked, evil king in Israel. And God was not happy with this. And what the alliance involved was to make ships, to build ships together to go to Tarshish. And so he did that. He cut that deal. And they built the ships. And God was not happy with it. I don't know when he found out, when the king found out he had done something God wasn't pleased with. But notice in 2 Chronicles 20:37, the latter part of the verse. This is God speaking. "Because you formed an alliance with Ahaziah, the Lord has broken up what you have made." So the ships were wrecked and were not able to go to Tarshish. It's almost humorous. God lets him make this alliance, gave him the free will to do it, lets him build the ships, even though God is unhappy. And once they get the ships out there, which was a horrendous task to build those ships, the Lord allows a storm to come and just sinks them all to the bottom of the sea. Now, the fascinating thing about this is that I think that God allowed him to do that to give a visual demonstration to the rest of the children of Israel and also Judah. Because everyone knew about this situation, and they also knew that he had made an alliance with an evil, wicked king in Israel. So God really communicated through this particular situation, which was a very dramatic visual aid, as it were, not to make alliances with evil people. And so the principle relates to these alliances, these partnerships. And if you go to the New Testament, you'll have a very significant passage where Paul gives these incredible contrasts between light and darkness, between that which was good and that which was evil in terms of partnerships. And here's what he wrote, 2 Corinthians chapter 6. It's an exhortation to believers. Do not be mismatched with unbelievers. Now you see, Jehoshaphat made an alliance with a very evil, wicked king who was really, in a sense, an unbeliever. His father Asa had done the same thing, only this time with the pagan king in Syria. Do not be mismatched with unbelievers. For what partnership is there between righteousness and lawlessness? Now that is a significant contrast, isn't it? Between righteousness and lawlessness. Or, what fellowship does light have with darkness? Light, darkness. What agreement does Christ have with Belial? And there it's talking about Satan. Satan himself. Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? Here again, there's an extreme contrast. And what agreement does God's sanctuary, that is the church, have with idols? Again, a serious contrast. For we are the sanctuary of the living God. So the Lord really speaks to entering into partnerships that are a violation of His will. Now, when you look at the Old Testament, you'll see that because of some of these alliances, bad things happened. In this case, Jehoshaphat lost all of his ships. It was definitely a judgment of God. When it comes to his father, Asa, we see that he had disease within his feet because of that alliance that he made with the king of Syria. And he just hardened his heart. He didn't even consult God or go to God for healing. He went to physicians rather than going to God. It was like he was just turning his back on the Lord. And so we see that God brought judgment in very specific ways. When it comes to the New Testament, you see more of natural consequences. Natural consequences as a result of these false alliances or these inappropriate alliances. I remember talking with a woman one day who shared about her dad. And she gave me permission to share the story, but basically her dad went into business with an unbeliever. And he wasn't just an unbeliever. Her dad knew that this unbeliever was unethical. But he knew how to make money. And so he was motivated by, in a sense, greed, materialism, and he didn't listen. Her mother actually warned her dad, don't do that because you could get into serious trouble, but he did it anyway. He got into serious trouble with the government, incredible tax problems, and you know what? He suffered the consequence for 20 years. 20 years. You see, the dollar signs had motivated this woman's father to go into business with a dishonest man. And what happened was it cost him thousands and thousands of dollars in lawyer fees and fines because he made that improper alliance. I mean, that was a natural consequence. Fortunately, he didn't go to prison, but he really paid a big price because of that alliance. And I think that this is one of the things that Paul is warning against in terms of these significant contrasts. And of course, I could take the rest of the evening to share some pretty sad stories about men and women who violate this principle in terms of mixed marriages. Now, sometimes they turn out with a positive result where the unbelieving spouse becomes a believer. But I can also share with you some just incredible tragedies where the unbelieving spouse turns against the Lord, turns against the believing spouse, ends up divorcing or creating all kinds of issues, impacting the children, impacting economic situation, which leads to some serious problems. And when I am talking to a man and woman who want to get married and one of them is an unbeliever, I warn them. I warn them that this could lead to serious problems in their marriage. I go ahead and perform the wedding. I clear my conscience because they're going to go down into the justice of the peace and get married anyway, and at least I want to do something that God honors in relationship to a holy relationship, even though it's a believer and unbeliever. God honors it in marriage. But I at least want to be there when thing falls apart. Because who do you think they're going to run back to for help? But that's part of the result. That's a part of a natural consequence. So, this is a very important principle. When I was preparing this presentation, by the way, I was talking with a very good friend, and he said, we need to teach this principle starting with our children. We need to teach it in our Sunday school classes and our children's ministries, because today so many young people are growing up and violating this principle, going into partnerships, relationships with unbelievers that are disastrous and tragic. So here's the principle. Let me just state it once again. We should avoid entering into partnerships with individuals who do not share our biblical values.